Hello, friends. Welcome back to the channel, and thank you for joining me today for the second half of an amazing conversation that I got to have with Jeff Reynolds of the Jeff Mara podcast. Jeff has been one of my most highly requested guests, and in this second half of the interview, we're going to continue going through the questions that you guys sent in that you wanted me to ask him. Jeff's link to his YouTube channel will be in the description for anybody who isn't already familiar with him. Thank you for watching. Here's Jeff.
To go back to the most compelling interview I've had, another one of the most compelling things that I learned about are what people call background people. I don't know if you've heard of that or not.
Yeah, I heard of it. I believe in one of Dolores Cannon's interviews.
Yeah, that's where I learned it. I never had learned about that until I had a guest on. Her name is Gosha, and she is I think she claims to have some kind of contact with maybe the Pleiadians, and they communicate back and forth. And I think they told her about that. And for those of you watching Melissa's video here, background people are like people here on Earth that I guess have no spirit or no soul. Kind of like in a video game, I think they call them NPCs, non-player characters. Like if you're playing a game and you may be fighting other characters, but no one's controlling the character but the computer. So, which kind of brings us back to the Matrix type podcast, that if we're all living in a simulation, imagine that some of the people here are just bots. But Gosha said, and I don't know if Dolores said this too, that don't try to figure out who these background people are because you can't.
Yeah, Dolores said that it's not going to be anybody that you're actually interacting with. It's going to be more like, I think the example she said is you go to the airport and there's people there that nobody's ever going to interact with, but they're just there. I didn't know
Wow.
what to think of it at the time. I just remember her saying that.
Yeah, it's kind of mind blowing.
Yeah.
I wonder if I wish she was alive because I'd love to have her as a guest. I wonder if she would say we're living in a simulation,
Mm.
because that to me kind of infers that we are.
Yeah, well, I think it makes sense because there's a number of scientists who have come out and said it really looks like we're living in a simulation. But even before that happened, just the whole idea behind the near-death experience, when you learn that our spirits are being projected into the physical world. I mean, even before the scientists came out and said this, or before I heard about it, I was thinking it really sounds like a giant simulation that we're
Mm-hmm.
coming. It's like sitting down to play a video game, except you're immersing yourself in the character.
Mm-hmm. And I think a couple of my guests have said that the reason we keep coming back is we just get off on it. It's like we love it. Even though
Yeah.
we may have a tough life and a lot of problems, we still love it and keep coming back.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I feel like I relate to that. What do you think about it?
I think it's possible. I mean, I just don't know. Like I said, I mean,
Mm.
I, I need to have an end to eat. Well, I don't need to, but if I had one, maybe I'd have more answers.
Right. Well, I had a spiritual experience and I still don't have the answers because I can't remember most of them.
Mm.
Chelsea says, Jeff, what are some of the more notable lessons you've learned as a human being in doing all of these interviews?
I think my most recent, I don't know if you would say lesson, but what I'm applying to my life is is when I'm in a situation that's uncomfortable, I try to refocus it and reframe it and put love into the situation. So many of my guests talk about love and how important love is. So I I it finally, after hearing it 100 times, I finally decided to try to implement that into my life. And I find that I think it it helps make things better, and I think it's the right thing to do.
Oh, I love that. Do you think that the universe is benevolent, malevolent, or neutral, and why?
The universe,
Mm,
I
well,
think the universe in general is benevolent, and I love it how one of my guests said that the universe is conspiring for you.
mm,
There may be elements within the universe, maybe other beings out there that may be malevolent, but as a whole, the universe, and some people may, call the entire universe or everything God. I'm not sure how to classify all that, but in generality, I do believe the universe is benevolent.
hmm. And it's interesting that you mentioned karma earlier because someone actually wanted me to ask you about karma. What's your opinion on karma?
I don't know. That's a good question for
Hmm.
me as well. I mean, I recently had the guest that we talked about resolving karma, and I've had other guests that say, at least one that said we're beyond karma. And I had another recent guest that we talked about um, that karma is illogical.
Mm,
So,
yeah.
and all the guests made good points. So it's hard for me to choose which one is the right path to
Mm,
follow.
right. Yeah. I hear
I,
that.
for me, my podcast has become my own spiritual journey, something that I
Mm.
actually never expected. And I'm glad I used the word journey because I'm still on it. I'm still changing. Have you found that similar for you?
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. I don't think I'll ever get to a point where I have all the answers or I have it all figured out. I don't know if that's even possible.
Hmm. Yeah, I agree.
Have you found in your interviews as you've been on this journey that you feel like you get more of a grasp of what life is all about, or do you feel like you're just left with more questions?
I'm probably left with more questions, but that may be due to my own fault of not studying my own
Mm,
guess and as I mentioned earlier, writing it down and really kind of taking it apart what they say and writing it down and doing it kind of in an academic fashion.
mm. You've had so many guests on that would be pretty time consuming for you, would
Hmm.
it?
Right, it is, because I do a daily show, and it's almost just enough to keep up with that alone.
Mhm.
Besides going back and then listening to our podcast and thinking about it and writing down, what works for me and what were the most important parts of what the guest has said and how does that fit into my world vision or my universal vision.
Right.
Would take some time. Maybe in my retirement I can do that.
Yeah, and then you can
If I
write a
ever
book
retire.
about it
Right.
and I'll buy it and read it.
I told my guests though that I enjoy this, and I said if I won the lottery, not my guests, my audience. I think I told it like one night on the live stream. I said if I won the lottery, I would still keep doing this. That's how much I like it.
That's how you know you're doing what you're supposed to do. So you are a very open-minded person, Jeff, and a lot of people notice that and appreciate that. Have you ever had anybody on that really um, pushed the bounds of what you're able to believe?
I don't think so. Uh, I mean, pushing my bounds of belief, no. I just would be sometimes I would get information that I had never come across before. Like we said, the
Mm,
background people.
mhm.
So it would be new information, not something that's unbelievable.
Right. Yeah, and I think there's a lot of information like that in Dolores Cannon's books. I can't think what they're called, but there's a series of them that
Hmm.
have a lot of really like out there but interesting stuff in them.
Hmm.
Have you ever had anybody on that has a story about a walk-in?
Yeah, I've had a couple.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've had a few. And it kind of cleared things. I think one of my recent walk-in guests kind of cleared things up for me about that. Um, Another thing that I think about a lot is guests will talk about who we are as a spiritual being. For example, I guess our awareness is really who we are, and our awareness is really separate of the mind.
Mhm.
And the mind, even though it thinks and it kind of connects with our awareness, it's kind of separate. And so, our chatter of our brain and these thoughts that go through our head, thousands of times a day. And then our brain kind of gets into patterns, neurologically, even speaking. If you keep doing something over and over, the wiring in your brain keeps becoming, it becomes thicker and thicker. So that becomes patterns. The things that you do over and over during the day gets reinforced over and over. And if you look into Joe Dispenza's work, you'll see
Yeah.
that he talks about that a lot.
Yeah.
So is our awareness, which possibly is who we really are, completely separate of those mind patterns that are just running over and over again? And so kind of get back to what you're saying about with walk-ins. Within these mind patterns, does some of our memories store within the mind, even though it may also store somewhere else, which people will call the Akashic records? I believe Dr. Eben Alexander calls it the quantum hologram.
Mhm.
So when you have a walk-in that comes in and takes over, um, or I should go back to one of my previous guests. It appeared that this guest came in and took over, and at the beginning was kind of had amnesia a little bit, and then finally I think started connecting with the last person's memories, and can kind of end up orienting him or herself to the person's life, but is still a completely kind of a new person now. And the fascinating thing is, it seems like that person couldn't really remember much about where he or she was before he walked in.
Oh, wow.
So I don't know if that answers your question. It's such a ambiguous thing to talk about. It's
Mhm.
something so non-tangible to talk about. It's hard to kind of put these thoughts together and kind of surmise what it all means.
Right.
So now I hope everybody's getting that when we get into these subjects, it should, if you're into this too, maybe we all should be writing down our thoughts and where are we going with all this? I mean, even I think to get even a definition of what consciousness is
Mm.
difficult to do.
What's your definition of consciousness, or do you have one?
I don't know. I mean, I think, obviously main science will teach you it's just awareness, like the being aware. Um, but I originally thought that people will call it a dual system. And what it is you have a body and you have consciousness. And consciousness just kind of runs the body while it's here and then it leaves. And that was kind of my original way that I put things together. But after one of my guests explained it to me that our body is just manifested by our consciousness here, I've kind of started
Right.
leaning that direction. And I think a lot of people lean that direction. But, I recently had another guest that made a case that it's not that way.
Right.
So it's hard to kind of, make a decision on what it is. And I think that's probably or possibly a big debate for a lot of people.
Yeah, and there are two trains of thoughts that sorry, I can't talk today for some reason. But the two trains of thought that I think I hear you mentioning there is the one where our consciousness is projected into our body and then it leaves. And then the other train of thought is that consciousness actually creates the body. And
Mhm.
there's some spiritual texts that teach that, like A Course in Miracles,
Mm,
that the body is a complete manifestation of consciousness.
mm, I need to read that.
So I've often thought about it myself. And I wonder if maybe it's like a combination of the two, where maybe my body isn't a manifestation directly of my consciousness, although I think some things could be controlled by my consciousness, like maybe to some extent I can control my mental and physical health with my consciousness, and maybe we have a lot more abilities than we think we do. I'm just sort of thinking out loud here.
Mhm.
But maybe the whole reality system itself that we're a part of is a creation of consciousness, but maybe like a collective consciousness or something like
Mhm.
that.
Yeah. Yep. I think about that too.
Yeah.
So I don't know, we don't know. We'll find out on the other side.
Yeah, we will. That's the part of the fun of being here. We get to speculate about all this stuff
Mm.
and try to figure it out. Well, Jeff, I'm sorry to end this. Thank you so much for coming on
Mm.
and having this interview. I've really enjoyed catching up with you and discussing some of these topics with you.
Well, thank you for having me on your show. I wish you massive success with your channel, and I wish you and all your audience the best.
Thank you so much, and I wish you the best with everything that you're doing. Keep up the good work.